Three, two, one, go. Or not. Skip ahead while I wait for the stream to begin. I gotta make sure it's working before I jump into the topic. And it's doing the same thing that it did in the past. It's not showing any fucking image. Give it another moment. And here it comes. Another. It only took 40 seconds. Okay, take two. Citizen Kane in 2024. Warning, this does contain spoilers. Now, I've heard of this film my entire life pretty much, and I always found the title intriguing. I used to like black and white films when I was a lot younger. Citizen Kane was just one that it never came on TV, not even late at night. Perhaps because it was an American film, most of the late night black and whites were British. And, Orson Welles always seemed like an interesting guy. I think he'd passed away before I really grew up. But he always seemed like, it was just an enigmatic, image of this film that existed in my mind. And it was meant to be, one of the best films ever. And I had no idea what it was really about. I never looked into it. I suppose I may have been put off. When you're pressured to watch something or read something, well, for me anyway, it puts me off reading it or watching it. And I just never got around to watching Citizen Kane. I've never seen Dr. Zhivago. I've never seen 2001: A Space Odyssey. All these things that you're meant to watch. I haven't. But finally, I have, because I found a copy on VHS. Now, my copy had kind of bad sound quality. But then again, the film was made in 1941, so it I assume wouldn't have been amazing. Well, I don't know, maybe it was amazing quality, but it was a fairly expensive production. It was a very good film. I was taken in within the first seconds. It's very rare for a film to do that. And when you are taken in the first, 30 seconds or so of film, it's normally a sign that it's going to be a good movie, because the person who produced it, directed it, and so on, they knew that there are certain tricks that capture your attention and you're intrigued and want you to keep listening. And with Citizen Kane, the first scenes, I think it's like an iron gate or something. It's obviously black and white, and it's very, very dark. And there's this very, very heavy music playing, and it's very ominous and dramatic. And that's what pulled me in. And then there's all the newspaper headlines flashing by. As people who have seen the film will know, like I said, if you haven't watched it, there will be spoilers. Stop here, go out, buy the DVD. It'll cost you like $3 online. Watch it, and then, if you feel like coming back, come back. So the movie starts with basically Charles Foster Kane, whatever his name is, dying. And it's sort of recollections of his, images and scenes of his life from an investigative journalist who's trying to find out what his dying words meant. One word. I really liked the lighting, the contrast of light and dark throughout the film. I liked the debonair character of Kane. I liked his I've forgotten the name of the character. But the character is basically his sort of almost a guardian, business sort of guardian, almost like a trustee character with a Jewish name. I forget the name of the character, but anyway, incredible script, incredible acting. It's almost a faultlessly produced film. But is it the greatest film in the world? First of all, I don't believe in the best. When it comes to the arts, there's no such thing as the best this or the best that, in my view. Because arts, an artistic thing is relevant to various other things. And, how can you compare Citizen Kane to a comedy or a horror movie or war movie, or a musical or whatever? You really can't. But it is just generally a very good film. Apparently not that popular when it came out. But the lighting, and I'd say the best lighting is in the first half of the film, even the first quarter of the film. And it becomes a little more conventional after that. The interesting sort of camera angles and sweeps, and the kind of things that I historically didn't really take in when watching films, but now I'm trying to be more analytical. That's why I do the GH6 content, because I bought a GH5 because I wanted to make a film one day. So now I'm trying to analyze films as I watch them. And, the scene where the camera must have been on a giant boom and it sort of moves towards this building and ultimately sort of almost goes through the ceiling, and then I think it goes through like some decorative arch over a gateway and then towards a building and sort of almost into the building. There are scenes where you think you're looking at a photograph or one scene, and then it turns into a live image. Scenes with sort of a wide angle shot of one of the characters just sitting in a chair in a room speaking, and you can see their whole body, not just their face or bust. You see all of them, and just interesting. It just makes it feel different. It makes it feel different, and the darkness of it all. Obviously, being black and white, I think today. See, this is where we get into Citizen Kane in 2024. The black and white lends a certain exoticism to the film that modern films just don't have. And not just the black and white, but when you're watching it on VHS and it's a bit shitty. Yeah, and the slightly old-fashioned way of speaking that the characters had. Whether or not it was sort of old-fashioned at the time, because a lot of the characters are sort of senior years. I don't know, but just an excellent script. Superb acting. I don't know why Orson Welles isn't famous for more things. It's like, apparently he's associated with War of the Worlds, if he might have done that on radio, but he played that role of Citizen Kane, or, Kane so well. And they must have had a very good, I think, with the benefit of black and white and maybe slightly grainy footage, it made it easier to change his appearance to look older as the film progressed, because he was quite young when it was filmed. But who knows? I'd say that towards the end of the film where he's sort of bald, that's probably the least convincing. The scene where he's in his 40s, very, very realistic. But in 2024, there's some things that I just felt a bit tired. Yes, the whole flashing up newspaper headlines. I mean, at the time, I don't know how many films would have done that, but you see that all the time now. Except in very modern films, it would be like cable news headlines, maybe even internet headlines. So it's kind of an old trick. The it's the part of the story where his wife wants to be a singer, and he basically makes his newspaper give rave reviews, even though she's not a very good singer, and builds her an opera house, and tries to create this illusion. I've heard apparently someone did that, like for real, more recently, and I have heard people talk about that kind of thing, and it's just, it seems like a tired, I don't know, plot line, but it probably wasn't at the time. It was probably very clever. The idea of Kane being a bit of an asshole at times, like writing the shit review of his own wife's singing. I think that was ahead of its time, and I think there was a time in movies where the protagonist was always like very pure and good, and those films with such a pure protagonist are often very boring. It's far more interesting when the person has two sides to a personality, like everyone does. So, but had that been done a lot up, I don't know. I'd have to study 1930s American cinema, but perhaps it hadn't been done so much. It's been done a fair bit since, except perhaps towards like 90s and early 2000s, where there's a lot of really bad films made. So, the character development was interesting. There's another film I want to mention, but I haven't actually seen it, but apparently I can guess maybe there are elements that have been borrowed a little bit from Citizen Kane. So, but today, is it really that original to have that darker side of the character? Not really. The editing was superb. It's 1 hour 59 minutes. Didn't need to be a minute longer. Didn't need to be a minute shorter. As you sort of sensed it was ending, it's like you feel kind of, oh, it's ending already. You kind of want it to go. That's how a good film should be. You should never be sitting there wishing the film would end. I've watched a lot of movies of late, and a lot of them you just, you kind of know how it's going to end. The heroes come up against a villain, and you're just waiting for, the final battle, and then the villain dies, and the good guy. It's so boring. It's when you've seen that 1,000 times, it's so boring. This is a completely different type of film. But the way it ends, and like I said, spoilers, so, as the person is trying to find out what Rosebud meant, which was Kane's final word before he dies, after having lived a life of basically a multi-billionaire. And we'll come to like the significance to American culture in a minute. But lived this life as a billionaire, and then his final word is Rosebud, and he drops dead at a modest age. Rosebud was the name on his sled as a kid before he was taken from his parents and raised as a millionaire, basically. It was a memory of a point in his life where things were just very simple, and where he had family. And so you have this thing in the film where he had everything and could do everything and had heaps of power and collected, relics from all over the world, which this film never really went into that side that much, but it was just something that it felt like you had to know as a viewer. And you kind of see that in the end, which is kind of quite. I mean, it would have been interesting to know what editing decisions were done to cut out, because I'm sure they must have cut out a lot of that stuff. So it's interesting when you see the end of the film and they're moving all the statues and furniture and antiques around in his mansion. You sort of wonder, oh, why didn't we learn more about that as the film was going? And I don't think we had to. I think it could have been a bit boring. So yeah. Anyway, they're moving all the stuff around and they find they're burning some of it. And after he's dead, and they throw the rosebud thing in. So this is a guy who had everything, and then sort of the moral of the story is it's not money and wealth and power that matters. But that's kind of, and that's, would have been an interesting kind of thing as America was emerging out of the Depression. But, with the oil tycoons and everything, and the, Henry Ford and, back in the day. But watching it in 2024, it's like, yeah, we hear that shit every day. you know, don't obsess about money. Life's not about money. And it seems like kind of a not cheesy, but just kind of a tired, oh yeah, you know. So has that little bit really aged well? I don't think it has. It's still kind of a nice ending. I was thinking, was Rosebud the name of his parents' cottage? That's what I was wondering as it got toward the end of the film. Because I think there was a scene where, maybe there's a photograph of the cottage or something that came up, and that's what I was wondering. It was something to do with his childhood, which it was in the end. I actually had to pause it because when they showed the sled, I didn't know what it was because we don't have sleds in Australia. And I didn't recognise it from the start of the film. I was kind of, this is what happens when you're trying to do two things at once. But anyway, greatest film live. I just reject the idea that there is a greatest film in the world. Did I just say greatest film alive? A greatest film in the world. But I found it as a potential filmmaker, my own fantasies. I found it an inspiring film because it did things differently. It had some funny camera angles. It's quite grand in certain scenes with the mansion and the political stuff, and at the same time there was a certain subtlety. Like, you knew the guy was a multi-billionaire, but you didn't have to see him driving around in, whatever would have been the equivalent of a Lamborghini in 1941. Right. Like, they didn't have a huge budget for just demonstrating his wealth. I don't know where they filmed the scene towards the end where there's a huge fireplace. I'd be curious as to what building that is. If it's a real building at all. So it showed you the power to create an impression without having to do it in a coarse manner. But yes, just a really, really good script. And so that's Citizen Kane in 2024. A few things that have become a bit stale, a bit dry over the last 84 years, or 83 years. But still an inspiring film, still a film that you want to watch. I guess the other thing is the scandal where he's having the affair with the singer. Again, like a bit of a tired thing in 2024. Like, no one would give a shit, right, if that happened today. I like one of the subtle bits in the movie where I couldn't quite catch what they said because the audio was so bad on his VHS tape, but something about, candidate Kane caught in love nest with air quote singer, double quotation mark singer, like she wasn't really a singer. And then there's a bit in the film where he was apparently knew that article was going to run and he wanted to let it run or something. Again, I could have this wrong, but he wanted to get rid of the quotation marks because he didn't want her to be ridiculed as a singer, but he was willing to let the scandal burst open. Impact on American culture. I mean, did it legitimize that sort of billionaire class? Did it legitimize capitalism? Did it glorify billionaires? Humanize them? Because in parts of the film, he was the, media baron who's going to bat for the little guy. And that element, it's funny how that element of his character kind of disappeared. So it seemed. Throughout the film. I'm sure that was deliberate. I know when I watched Streetcar Named Desire, I couldn't help but that film had, start to explain why Americans act the way they do sometimes. Some of them. Is this partly why business people in America act the way that they do, or politicians act the way that they do? I heard it post on YouTube. Super smart guy. I don't know what his name. I've never seen him. He just came on someone else's panel, and he's basically talking about how Hollywood is the single most powerful element in shaping American political behavior. I'm paraphrasing. And American culture. And, if you want the population to go a certain way, you do it through Hollywood. And so, yeah, I can kind of see how this film may have had some effect. But yeah, some very amazing shots. I'd love to know more about the editing. Bit of a controversy, apparently, about who really wrote the film. Forget the other guy's name. It was co-written by Wells and someone called Malkowitz or something. And there's a bit of a controversy, right? And even when the film came out, like the other guy wanted credit as well, and he was given the credit as well. And that led to questions as to how much Orson Welles actually contributed. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. Scholars have looked at it and decided that Welles did have, a definitive contribution. Citizen Kane, great film, inspiring film. If you're just interested in film, it's a movie to watch. I would say just drop all the best film in the world bullshit. It's just an interesting film. It's a good, interesting story. It's interesting the way I don't actually like films that start like when someone's died or something's happened and then it goes back in the past to sort of show you everything happened. Because I feel like you always, as you're watching it, you always sort of, it breaks that storytelling sort of suspension knowing that the character's already dead. At least it does with me. So, it's interesting that it did that. But then again, it kind of had to do that. It wouldn't have been the same film without that. If it was just about his life, and then he died, and then he said Rosebud, it wouldn't have had the same effect. It's the fact that you had a journalist going around trying to find out what it meant because he thought maybe it was the name of a woman or something, and he's interviewing all the people from his life, and so that kind of led to a focus on that rosebud for a lot of the film, and then almost like in a French style, you find out right at the very fucking end what it really means. Like it's almost a tragedy what it is. That's what he really cared about most. So anyway, Citizen Kane, 2024. Glad I watched it. I don't feel like rushing out and watching it again with some better audio, but maybe I will one day. Yeah, if you ever want to make a film, highly recommend watching it. I think I'll leave it there.